Hello, and welcome to my channel, Sweet Banana Gaming, where I'll be doing, what else? Making videos about games! I figured I'd start things off with a franchise that is very near and dear to my heart, Pokémon. But I'm not just going to be doing any normal playthrough of Pokémon, I'm going to be playing a Wedlocke challenge. So for those of you who don't know what a Wedlocke challenge is, it's a variation on the Nuzlocke challenge, which if you don't know what that is, I'll explain everything in a few minutes. But basically, the Wedlocke challenge is a variation on the Nuzlocke challenge, and it was first introduced by Marriland on his YouTube channel back in December 2012. He's also the one responsible for creating the Wedlocke logo that you see on the screen now. Okay, so let's get started with the rules of the Wedlocke challenge. The first three rules are pretty much the same as the rules of a normal Nuzlocke challenge, but with a little twist. Rule number 1. Fainted Pokémon are considered dead. They must be released or permanently placed in the PC box. So in the past, on my own time, I've played one Nuzlocke challenge and one Wedlocke challenge, and in both instances, I always preferred to put my Pokémon in the PC box because there was just something about releasing the Pokémon that, I don't know, it seemed wasteful to me, or it just didn't seem like something I wanted to do. But for this challenge, I think I'll take the extra step, be more hardcore if you want to call it that, and I'll actually release my Pokémon. Now there's, I think, an issue releasing Pokémon that know an HM move, so if I do have to release a Pokémon that knows an HM move, I'll have to teach another Pokémon, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Rule number 2. You can only attempt to catch the first eligible Pokémon you encounter in each area. That pretty much suffices it for the Nuzlocke variant of rule number 2. Now for the Wedlocke challenge, however, there's a twist because the eligibility is based on the encountered Pokémon's gender. So first of all, genderless Pokémon are not eligible. So if your first encounter in an area is a genderless Pokémon, you just don't count that as your first encounter, you move on to the next one. Now the next part of the rule is a little bit trickier to explain, but if you don't have a full party, and if you have 1, 3, or 5 Pokémon in your party, you ignore any Pokémon encounters that have the gender you have more of. So for example, if you start your game and your starter Pokémon is male, then when you go to catch your first Pokémon, you can only attempt to capture a female Pokémon. So the first female Pokémon you encounter is your eligible encounter for that area. And another example, if your party has 5 Pokémon and you have 3 female Pokémon and 2 male Pokémon, then on the next area where you can encounter Pokémon, you must attempt to capture the first male Pokémon you find in that area. Also, if you fail in catching your first encounter, your first eligible encounter, then that's it, you don't get a Pokémon for that area. Now for some optional clauses you can add to this rule for a Nuzlocke or a Wedlocke challenge. The first one is highly recommended. It is called Dupes Clause, or Duplicates Clause. Any Pokemon species you have already captured is ineligible. So this is to prevent you from having a team full of Rattata or Pidgey. It allows you to have more variety to your team. Now from Generation 2 onward, it's easy to tell which Pokemon you've already captured because they'll have a Pokeball symbol next to their HP bar when you encounter them in the wild. Now, some people also like to add that you can't capture any Pokemon in the same evolution line of the Pokemon you've already caught. And while I think this is a good rule too for encouraging variety, I don't think I'm going to do it just because it's a lot easier to just go by the Pokeball symbol. It makes things a lot quicker. I don't have to second guess if I already caught that Pokemon or not. I mean, I'd probably remember, but you never know for sure. I think it's just easier to keep it simple. If you see the Pokeball symbol, you can't capture it. And then the other optional clause, which I will be employing even though I probably won't have to use it, is Shiny Clause, which if you encounter a shiny Pokemon, No matter when you encounter it, you can go ahead and try to catch it. However, you can't actually use it on your team unless it is also your first eligible encounter for that area. So that allows you, if you're lucky enough to find a shiny Pokemon during your playthrough, you can still go and catch it. You just can't actually use it unless it is your first eligible encounter. Now, rule number 3. Rule number 3 started off as more of an unwritten rule for Nuzlocke challenges, but it's become really a necessity, which is all Pokemon must be nicknamed. This seems like a simple rule, but the purpose of it is to make you form a better bond with your Pokemon, so it's more meaningful when you lose a Pokemon, and it's also more meaningful when you win. Rule number 4. This is the rule that really makes the Wedlocke challenge even more challenging than a regular Nuzlocke. Your Pokemon are partnered with each other and fight in pairs. They form a pair forever until one dies. And this has ramifications in battle. The Pokemon you send into battle can only battle alongside its partner if it has one. If you switch Pokemon during battle, you must switch for the Pokemon's partner. Now, when I did my first Wedlocke challenge, I called it a Wedlock Light because I didn't actually implement this rule of pairing Pokemon together in battle. I had the Pokemon paired, but I didn't restrict myself to only being able to switch between the two partners in battle. And at the time, I blogged about my playthrough, and I received a little bit of criticism for not including rule number 4, but at the time, this was really the first time I had ever done any kind of challenge. I had never done a Nuzlocke before. But I liked the little twist of the Wedlock where the Pokemon that you catch in each area is based on gender and the overall composition of your team. So I did the playthrough that way, and I called it a Wedlock Light. But now that I have more experience, I'm going to do the full Wedlock rules. That means I will be using rule number 4 to the fullest. So continuing to elaborate on rule number 4, if a Pokemon dies in battle, its partner must be sent into battle to avenge it. And then if that Pokemon also dies, then you send out a Pokemon and that pair continues the battle. Also, if a Pokemon's partner dies, it must be paired again as soon as possible, either with a Pokemon from the PC or a wild Pokemon if you have no eligible partners in the PC. And finally, because your Pokemon are paired, we also have rule number 5. You cannot withdraw a Pokemon from the PC unless a Pokemon in your party dies or is released. Now, you may release any Pokemon you want, even if it isn't dead, but this is not recommended because it pretty much goes against the intent of challenges like these, because usually the focus is supposed to be on the bond that you share with your Pokemon, and in this case, the bond that your Pokemon share with each other. But if you really want to feel like a jerk, you're absolutely free to release your Pokemon at any time. Also, if there is an HM move necessary for progressing in the game and none of your party Pokemon can learn the HM, then you may make a temporary substitution just for the purpose of using that HM outside of battle, but you may not use the substituted Pokemon in battle. And also, as soon as possible, you must replace the substituted Pokemon back in the PC and withdraw the Pokemon that was in your party. So this clause is added to the rule just to prevent you from getting stuck in the game. So you're allowed to make a temporary substitution, but in order to not compromise the integrity of the challenge, you can't use them in battle and you must return the Pokemon to your PC as soon as possible, because that Pokemon isn't really part of the story. The focus of the story is on you and your partnered Pokemon. Okay, so let's review all the rules real quick. Rule number 1, fainted Pokemon are considered dead. Rule number 2, you can only attempt to catch the first eligible Pokemon you encounter in each area. Rule number 3, all Pokemon must be nicknamed. Rule number 4, your Pokemon are partnered with each other and fight in pairs. And rule number 5, you cannot withdraw a Pokemon from the PC unless a Pokemon in your party dies or is released. So hopefully I've explained all those rules pretty well. If there's still anything that's a little unclear, if you watch me play through, I think you'll get the hang of it and understand it pretty easily. And with that, I will see you next time as I begin my Pokémon LeafGreen Wedlocke Challenge.